Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. There's 5 new Cenarion minis in Warcraft Rumble and I have now had the opportunity to play with all of them and play with most of their talents. So in this video I'm going to take a look at what are the best talents for the new Cenarion minis. And let's start with Cenarius itself. Cenarius has 3 talent options. There's Revitalize, Force of Nature and Wild Growth. Force of Nature is perhaps the strongest one. Force of Nature summons treants from Cenarius' roots, but also from Earth and Moon roots and any other roots that you can imagine. If it roots the target and the target dies, there's going to be a treant summoned, but only when Cenarius is on the board. If you root and kill stuff when Cenarius is not on the board, nothing is going to happen. Also note that only ground minis can be rooted. Flying minis cannot be rooted, so no treants for you if you meet flying units. The treants themselves, they are roughly equivalent to skeletons, so you know what a skeleton is at this point. So treants are pretty much the same, so getting a whole bunch of these treants would be like getting a whole bunch of skeletons. Great against ground squads, obviously. You can turn some chickens into an army of skeletons instead, so very powerful. Overall, fairly strong talent. However, my favorite talent for Cenarius is Revitalize. Allies entering Tranquility trigger an additional heal pulse. But Revitalize is not as general purpose as Force of Nature because you need to build around Revitalize. It procs additional heals from any allied minis. Every single chicken that enters, every single new vulture that you summon, every single skeleton that your necromancer summons. You start to see the point. This talent is strong when you have squads, but if you have like individual big minis, then this talent doesn't do much because you get an occasional heal every now and then, and that's just not going to do much. But combine it with some squads, combine it with some summoning effects, and it is downright hilarious and also fairly strong because it's going to heal your tank a ton. But you really need to build around it. You just can't take a generic deck, put Revitalize on your Cenarius and succeed. It doesn't work that way. So for that purpose, Force of Nature would be stronger. But Revitalize, building with squads, that's a ton of fun. And finally, Cenarius has Wild Growth, a global root effect. Note that only ground minis can be rooted again. I'm not a big fan of these deploy effects, because then you play the mini and then it does something and then never again. So you don't get them very often, then you have to hold this mini in order to get an opportunity to play it. Wild Growth has some upsides, it is still a fairly long route, but I think Wild Growth in general is the weakest Cenarius talent. Then we have Onu, Ancient of Lore, and my favorite talent for Onu is, without a doubt, From the Trees. Minis deployed within safe arbor deal double damage on their first attack, so that's just going to add a lot of DPS, and DPS is good. It does not work with Sappers, by the way. I tested it, I wanted it to just make Sappers blow everything away, but no, it doesn't. You need to actually deal some damage to regular means. But still, Pyromancers, these kind of heavy hitters, and From the Trees, you summon them right at the front line, they drop an immense bomb. It is wonderful. Onu also has Petrify. Petrify and Death keeping Safe Arbor active for 8 seconds, which means that Onu is going to turn into a statue that's also going to block enemy movement. And this Petrify can keep your Onu push going, as you can even deploy another Onu. When the first Onu dies, well, I make another Onu, I guess. So Petrify is also really strong. Petrify probably the stronger PvP talent, and From the Trees the stronger PvE talent, perhaps. I do like both of them, although I prefer From the Trees. Then there's Bog Beast. Minis deployed within Safe Harbor gain armor for 8 seconds, but you can deploy minis ahead of Onu, you can deploy minis behind Onu, so you're always going to be able to position your fragile DPS in a way that they don't take damage, and you can get your tanks up front. And your tank should have whatever traits they need to meet your opponent anyway, so I just don't think Bog Beast is nearly that powerful, especially compared to From the Trees and Petrify, so it just doesn't have quite that flexibility. As for troops, we have Ancient of War, and Ancient of War scaling. Ancient of War is flexible cost, uses all of your gold from 1 to 10. The scaling means that you generally prefer to play cheap Ancients of War. 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 costs just about at most. You just don't want to go over that. And well, that means that Behemoth is completely out of the question. If played for 6 or more, gain siege damage. Yeah, you don't want that. You want to play a Molten Giant if you want 6 cost with siege damage. It will have even a lot more health than Ancient of War at 6. So then it's a combination between Sapling and Lightning Rod. And Lightning Rod is totally game changing for PvP. It should be a first pick if you ever intend to play PvP, because it protects you from spells, it protects you from unbounds. It's just a phenomenal talent for that purpose. However, it's generally not that strong in PvE. It can be strong in PvE very situationally when you meet bosses that you know have specific unbounds or specific spells. But for PvE purposes, Sapling is the best talent. Sapling adds a lot of DPS, and your cheap ancient already has a chunk of health. It is a little bit lacking in DPS. Sapling fixes that problem and makes Ancient of War a really, really good low-cost tank. So I do like Sapling a lot. But if you only get one talent and you ever intend to play PvP, then you kind of have to pick the Lightning Rod because it's so fundamental to PvP. Then we have Bog Beast, and before Bog Beast released I was quite certain that Living Wood is going to be the talent. I'm not so sure anymore. Gain armor until 50% health. And Living Wood does not return armor back to Bog Beast if it goes below 50% health and it's healed back up. And I think that is a major flaw, major weakness in the talent. So that means that in any sort of healing comp where Bog Beast is expected to go below 50% and return back up, then it's just going to lose the armor. That makes it much weaker. It's still the best talent for non-healing armies, because obviously you still have that armor at the start. But if you plan to use Bog Beast with something like Cenarius, or if you plan to use it with Shaman, then Flourish is actually stronger than Living Wood. I played with Living Wood, I played with Flourish in same kind of circumstances, and Flourish just kept performing better when I had some heals backing up my Bog Beast. Flourish heals received are 30% more effective. So Flourish is the one that I like the most because I like playing Bog Beast with a healer. But obviously, for generic purposes, if you don't have a healer in your army, then Living Wood is stronger. Rampant growth on death, root nearby enemies for 6 seconds. That one I just don't like that. I don't like my tanks dying, and I don't think the root effect is that strong either. And finally, there's Moonkin. Moonkin was the hardest choice. I actually had to play multiple accounts so that I was able to get all of these 3 talents, so that I was able to play with them all. Because I just wasn't super happy with any of them, I guess. There's Moonglow. Spells gain 2 levels if played immediately after Moonkin. What does immediately after mean? That means that it has to be a next card. I mean, it doesn't have to be immediately after, you don't have to hurry to play it. But you have to play that before you play any other mini after Moonkin. Still, that's the chain-like effect, getting some levels on spells, and if you're a little bit underleveled, getting those levels on spells can be really strong sometimes. Then there's Vengeance. Taking damage increases casting speed by 50% for 5 seconds, so DPS, major DPS increase. However, when I was trying to play with Vengeance, I generally found it very disappointing, because if my Moonkin started to take damage, then it typically just died, and then didn't have much time to use that increased DPS. Obviously, if you are able to get your Moonkin into a fight, and then there's some AoE damage, and it takes just a little bit of damage, and then it just boom, 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 just to go off with that Vengeance with some sweet DPS. Yeah, I guess Vengeance is the most general purpose talent of all of these, because there's always a chance that it's going to be activated. It's inevitably going to be activated at some point for every Moonkin's life, because at some point they are going to start taking damage. I just found that very often they took so much damage that then they just died immediately. And then there's Typhoon. I didn't think much of Typhoon originally. It knocks the enemies back just a little bit, like the Execute knockback effect, and it stuns them very briefly. But obviously this is a deploy effect. I don't like deploy effects very much, like when do you use them? You use them around your core maybe, break off an attack, but you kind of want to be the one doing the attacking. However, when I played Typhoon Moonkin with Onu, so that I have Safe Harbor, I can deploy these Typhoon Moonkins at the front line and get that knockback and that short stun. That was actually really, really great. I think Typhoon is the best Moonkin talent when you play Moonkin with Onu, but it's kind of useless otherwise. So, tough choices. That Typhoon Moonkin with Onu, that was hilarious, and that was very strong. I do love that a lot. Vengeance, the most general purpose talent, but generally disappointing. Moonglow, some potential upside, so really hard choice with Moonkin, I have to say. I probably would pick Typhoon just because I loved playing this with Ono, but I realized that it would be quite useless with any other army. If you just want to maximize general performance, then you would pick Vengeance instead. So those are the new Cenarion minis, and I hope this gave you a little bit of insight into how the talents work. Lots of fun talents, really fun minis, super strong leaders. I like them a lot. I really look forward to playing more with Cenarion minis, and Cenarion Dungeon Week is starting on Sunday. That's going to be awesome. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.